everything, I said anything and everything. La 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 la, join us to talk about everything and anything. Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of Anything and Everything 2021. Happy New Year. This show acknowledges that everyone has a story. I'm your host and producer, Halima Sharif. I pray your year has started on the right foot, or as James Brown says, on the good foot. I also pray this year and beyond is a healthy and prosperous one for you and your loved ones. It's great to be back in production and to continue Anything and Everything. I have some amazing guests lined up for this year, and I'm very excited. Stay tuned for more updates on the Anything and Everything media website. Today, for our New Orleans Music Legends segment, we have Adonis Rose. Welcome, Adonis.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I'm excited to have you on the show. You know, you have been extremely busy, and considering the times that we're in, I think that's awesome. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you about all the happenings in your world.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. But first, let me share with you all Adonis's wonderful bio. Adonis Rose is a Grammy Award winning artist, composer, educator, and producer from New Orleans. He has played and recorded with the biggest names in jazz, including Terence Blanchard, Betty Carter, Dianne Reeves, Marcus Roberts, Harry Connick Jr., and Wynton Marsalis, and has performed on the most renowned stages in the world, such as Carnegie Hall, Olympia in Paris, North Sea Jazz Festival, Umbria, Birdland, Apollo Theater, Newport Jazz Festival, and Jazz at Lincoln Center, to name a few. Adonis has over 50 recordings to his credit, 5 as a leader, including 6 with longtime friend trumpeter Nicholas Payton. In 2010, he won a Grammy Award with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra for Best Large Ensemble. In January 2017, Adonis was named the artistic director of the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra and led the 18-piece orchestra to its first concert season in October of that year that featured world-renowned artists Sheila E, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Ledisi, Slick Rick, and Eric Benet. He has been instrumental in the organization's success by developing educational and community programs, leading performances, and developing partnerships associated with the Jazz Market, a 350-seat performance venue in the New Orleans Central City neighborhood, can't talk today, which is home to the orchestra. Prior to his role at the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, Adonis served as the artist in residence at the University of Texas Arlington and Cadillac Jazz by the Boulevard Festival, produced the Keller Jazz in June series, and founded the Fourth Word Jazz Orchestra, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. In 2019, Adonis produced the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra's most recent recording songs, the music of Alan Toussaint, on the legendary Storyville Records imprint, which received rave reviews. He is currently working on several new recordings with the orchestra and his own ensembles, and continues to tour, perform, and produce a range of projects. Once again, welcome, Adonis. So great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
Oh, yes, ma'am. You know, you have a very rich lineage, like many other musicians in New Orleans. Let's talk about your family's musical legacy in detail, in particular, your father and your uncle, Chris Severin.
hmm Well, yeah, my father, Vernon Severin, is a drummer here in New Orleans, and he plays on the local music scene. He actually works with a lot of brass bands, but he's been playing music pretty much all of his life. You know, he went to Bell for junior high school. He went to John McDonald. He played in the marching bands. And throughout the 70s, he played in a lot of funk and R&B bands. And he's currently, like I mentioned, he's still performing today. His younger brother, Chris, my uncle, is a bassist, world-renowned bassist, one of the best bass players in the world. He also had been playing music pretty much all of his life. He went to Bell and John McDonald, just like my father did, but he had a career as a touring musician and recording musician. My dad, worked regular jobs to support us, and he played music on the side. And as of up until about maybe 15 years ago after Katrina, he made music a full-time occupation. But my uncle, he was world-renowned and recorded with some of the best musicians in the world. He played with Dianne Reeves and toured and recorded with her for about 12 or 13 years. Dr. John, you can hear him on Dr. John's records, Alan Toussaint, George Duke, and a whole lot of other great artists. So that came from my grandfather. My grandfather was a drummer and a tap dancer, but not full time. He wasn't a full-time musician. He was a carpenter. That's what he did as a day job. But he like my dad did, he played music at night. So that's where my uncle and my dad got it from. I also have another uncle, their oldest brother. He also plays the drum set. He still plays now. He's in his 70s. From my dad's side of the family is primarily where my musical roots come from.
Well, you pretty much answered my next question. I mean, you really could not escape that. You know, it was a part of your lineage. It was a part of you growing up. You know, what did it for you? I mean, as far as your musical journey is concerned, you know, especially playing the drums. You know, why the drums? You know, talk about your actual musical training and the whole journey.
Well, I didn't really have a choice in what I wanted to play. My dad wanted me to be a drummer because my grandfather, my dad's account of it was my grandfather looked at me and saw me tapping on something and said, "Look, that boy's a drummer. Teach him the drums as soon as possible. He's the next generation drummer from our family lineage." So my dad took what my grandfather said seriously and started me out on a drum set literally at about 4 years old. So I can remember being in the St. Bernard projects with a drum pad and some drumsticks and learning how to play a double stroke roll. My dad got me a drum set around that time. And I was trying to get pictures, see if my family still had pictures of me playing the drum set. I would be on a porch in the Senate Court in the St. Bernard projects, playing my drum set while all of my friends stood around just kind of watching me play. So I've been playing the drums all of my life, pretty much. But I started there. I went from there just playing the drums around the house. And then I got into the concert band at Phillips Elementary School. They had a concert band back then, and I played snare drum in a concert band. From there, I went on to junior high school. I went to Capto. I joined the marching band at Capto. Became the section leader of the drum section and did that throughout junior high school. Right before I went to high school, I went and did an audition for the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. And at the time, Clyde Kert Jr. was the instructor there. So I did the audition uptown on Perrier Street at the old school. I went up there, got accepted into the program at Nokia, and then I started my journey as a jazz musician at Nokia. So when I got there, there were other musicians there who I ended up working with, who were my peers. Nicholas Payton was one of them. He was already at Nokia. He's about a year older than I am. Mark Bro was there, Dwight Fitch, Jason Stewart. All of those guys were in the class that I was in while I was there. So after, playing my first gig by way of Clyde Kert, working with Clyde Kert, he brought us on our first gigs. He gave us our first opportunities, and he had a really organic way of teaching. We learned theory and harmony and things about music and played tunes all day, every day, and we practiced as hard as we could to get better. But Clyde made the music real for us and gave us the understanding that the music came from the inside out and not the other way around. So I learned a lot from Clyde when I was at Nokia. And Nokia works with a lot of the universities indirectly to audition their students to make sure that the students from Nokia have opportunities to be able to go to school outside of New Orleans. So the people from Berklee College of Music came to Nokia, and I auditioned for Berklee, and I was accepted into the school. So after being accepted into the school, I had to go to Dallas for a live audition to try out for their presidential scholarship, where you get the full scholarship for 4 years. So I did that. I ended up receiving a presidential scholarship. And I flew to Dallas and then I came back home. So during that time while I was in high school, I mean, I was working almost every night at clubs. I was playing with Jermaine Basil. I mean, if you name it, I was playing a bandstand with them. You know, Walter Payton, just all the musicians in town. So one night I was playing at Snug Harbor and Terence Blanchard came in to see the gig. And then a couple of days later, before my high school graduation, he called my dad and talked to my dad about me traveling and going on tour with him. So literally after I finished high school, about 2 or 3 days later, maybe not even a week, I went on the road with Terence Blanchard. That was my first touring gig. So I went out with Terence Blanchard. I still had my scholarship to Berkeley. So I went out with Terence. This was the summertime. After going on the road and traveling the world and playing the best venues and jazz clubs in the world, I did not want to go to school. I wanted to stay on the road. So I told Terence, he was like, man, you know, I would like to keep you in the band, but I don't want you to miss the experience of being able to go to college and seeing what that's like. And I was like, I don't want to see what college is like. This is better than college. He was like, well, man, you got to go to school. So I ended up going to school. Once I got to Berkeley, I ended up getting a lot of other opportunities with artists that I never thought I would work with. Marlon Jordan, who's a great trumpeter from New Orleans, he was signed with Columbia Records. I ended up touring with his band. Delphio Marcellus, he got a record deal at that time, and I ended up touring with him. I was working with Wynton Marsalis, doing quartet gigs with him in New York and playing at Jazz at Lincoln Center in the very early stages. I went from there. I did the first Jazz Ahead program with Betty Carter, and after that, I did some work with her outside of that program. And then it just kind of went on and on and on from there. I did a Jazz at Lincoln Center tour, which ultimately took me out of school. We did a 6-week tour with that band. I played with Marcus Roberts for a couple years during that time. So I just, doing some gigs with Dianne Reeves while my uncle was in that band. I went in and subbed for the drummer, Billy Kilson, when he couldn't make it. So I was just moving around a lot, doing a lot of different types of gigs until I did that Jazz at Lincoln Center tour, and it killed my spring semester, and I decided to move back home. Well, when I moved back home, at that time, Nicholas Payton had just got a record deal with Verve Records. So I got a phone call from him. He asked me if I would be willing to come to join his band, to go out on the road, to start his new band up, go out and do some tours and do records and recordings. So I joined the band, and that became really successful. And we worked 8 to 10 months out of the year for a good 10 years. And that was a great experience for me. Opened up a lot of doors for me, and I learned a lot from Nicholas. But then I went on to do a lot of other gigs too. I worked with the great vocalist Dianna Freelong for 10 years. I worked with Harry Connick for almost 2 years in his band. And it just kept going on and on and on. Hurricane Katrina came, and I relocated to the Dallas-Fort Worth area while I was still working with Harry Connick. I don't know if you want me to go on or if you want me to take a break, but that's the short version of a long story.
No, I mean.
So you can stop me whenever you're ready. Yeah.
No, I listen. The whole idea of doing these shows and these segments is for you to tell your story, and a lot of times that's not captured. So, I want you to continue because I'm learning a lot, and then other folks who are listening to this will hear and learn quite a bit as well. So.
All right. Well, when I got to Dallas-Fort Worth, I remember driving into the city when I got there. I stayed in a hotel for a couple months out there before we could find a place to stay. And I remember calling up Wynton, and I was like, man, do you know anybody in Fort Worth, Texas? He was like, man, they closed the Caravan of Dreams. I don't know anybody in Fort Worth, Texas, but if you need some help with anything, money, anything, call me.
Right.
So I was there. I moved out of the hotel, got me an apartment. Couldn't practice in an apartment, so I needed to find a practice space. So I was half this time I was working with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, because that orchestra started in 2002. So in between all of the other gigs and bands and things that I was doing, I was still working with the orchestra. I did the first concert with the orchestra. Any tour dates we had, recordings, I was still doing that in between all the other things that I had going on. But I spoke with one of the orchestra members who knew that I was living in Arlington, who
Mhm.
told me, well, man, a good friend of mine runs the jazz department at UT Arlington. And if you need a place to practice, I can call him and ask him if he can provide a space for you. That was Ed Peterson, who's a great saxophonist who also plays in the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra. So he called his friend and connected us, and his friend gave me a practice room at the University of Texas for me to be able to practice. Well, once we had more conversations, me and the guy that was running the music department there, the jazz department, he asked me to join the department to be an artist in residence there for them. And I agreed to do it. And that got going. So what ended up happening was I was in Fort Worth, Texas for 10 years. So during the time that I was there, and having worked with Jazz at Lincoln Center and working with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra and nonprofits, jazz institutions, I thought it would be a good idea to start my own.
Right.
So while I was out there, I put together a big band and decided to deal with and bring some of the New Orleans music and culture to the Fort Worth, Texas area. So I started the big band. It went really well. We had a monthly concert series that we did every month at Bass Hall, downtown Fort Worth. So I started that, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And then I was just moving around trying to find ways to create opportunities for the musicians that lived there. I definitely felt that there was a need for a bigger presence for the music in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, even though they have a lot of music programs there.
Mhm.
I really didn't, I felt that they needed to have more music. And then I had a contribution to make to the city while I was there. So I started the nonprofit, I started the big band, started to do a concert series. There was a jazz club there that had just opened in Sundance Square. I worked with the owners of that jazz club to bring in special guests. I brought Dianna Freelong in. That's the first time I had worked with her. Then I joined her band after that. I brought Ellis Marsalis in. I brought Curtis Fuller in. I was bringing Freddie Hubbard in, but he got sick and couldn't come.
Mhm.
And then he passed away shortly after that.
Right.
I got involved with the Cadillac Festival. I was an artist in residence there and helped, artistically curate that festival. I brought in some great artists to that festival. I brought Randy Brecker and just a host of musicians to that while I was there. I started music series while I was there. I gave private lessons when I wasn't touring. So I tried to give as much as I could to the area while I was there.
Mhm.
To fast forward a little bit, my mom got sick,
Okay.
and she gave me the impression that she wanted me to move back home. So I started to slowly make my transition back to New Orleans after about 10 years of being in Fort Worth.
Mhm.
I can keep going or I can stop.
No, let me inject something real quick. You know, what's interesting about this is that, and this has not happened on this show before, but I'm glad there's always something new. But the fact that I read your bio and the short version, I appreciate you diving deeper and taking
Hmm.
through scene by scene. Well, not just me, the folks who are listening, but I think it's important because see, I'm learning more, and then it's helping me to generate more questions that I have for you. So
Yeah, well, that's good. That's why I don't want to keep talking because I
yeah,
want you to
because
be able to ask your
this is
questions.
something that will be shared over and over again, you know, for generations to come. So if you're okay with it, I want you to keep it moving.
Okay, I can keep it moving. That's no problem. So I moved back home. I came back to New Orleans. At the time, I was working with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra. We had started touring a whole lot more. The organization started to become really successful. And at this time, we did a record with Dee Dee Bridgewater called Dee Dee's Feathers. And we were touring all over the entire world. We toured the world for about a year and a half with that project. But when I was moving back home, the organization was going through a rough time with the former leadership that was there, and I was asked to come in to take over the organization as at the time, musical director, and then artistic director. So I came in and started working in that capacity with the orchestra in about 2016.
Okay.
So I came on as a musical director. At that particular time, the orchestra hadn't performed in 2016 in about a year. All the concerts stopped, everything. It actually kind of it felt like we were going through an organizational pandemic at the time. You know, the leadership was gone. There was a whole lot of scandal and things going on with the organization. I was coming in. I was really hesitant about coming into an organization and just doing it. I kind of had to do it at the last minute. But, you know, the former leader of the organization felt like I was the most qualified person of all of the people in the band to come in and do it because of all the experience that I had running a big band, starting a nonprofit, teaching and doing all of these things. And while he was resigning, he was on the phone with me at the board meeting asking me to take his place. He was going to present it to the board to see if they would approve it, and then I would have to come in and get vetted by the board, and then we would move forward. So I told him I would do it, and that's how I started in that capacity with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra.
Wow, man, that's a lot of history. Oh, keep going.
I can keep going.
I'm laughing.
But I'll let you ask some questions.
No, you know, well, see, here's the thing. The questions that I have for you are already in what you shared, but at the same time, like, for example, you mentioned Clyde Kert, you mentioned Nick Payton, you know, you're a drummer, but I want to continue. But one of the things I want to say, you know, Clyde Kert was an amazing musician, teacher, educator. And I know he played a major role as a part of your development, in addition to your family's history. So let's go back to that, but I want to come back to this as well, because this is quite interesting that you kept going, you know, even, you know, going to Berkeley, you didn't want to go to Berkeley, and then Terence say, look, man, you got to go to school, you know, and so that also helped to enhance your growth and your development. But each phase of your journey, you know, I see this continued relevancy of who Adonis Rose is and how you continue to make it work, even, you know, as you said, an organizational pandemic per se, even though we're in a pandemic now, but you're still there, you're still remaining relevant. So continue talking about that, how people like Clyde Kert was like a catalyst in your growth, and then go back. Okay.
Okay, well, he was a catalyst for a lot of things. I mean, he influenced the music just by the people that he played with and the type of music that he played. I mean, you know, he really was into avant-garde music. Him and Kid Jordan had a band together, and we used to love watching that band perform. Yeah, he was responsible and inspired a lot of musicians, not only myself. And people really don't realize the impact that he had on the New Orleans music scene for the last 30 years. When Ellis Marsalis left Nokia, Clyde Kert came in. And when Clyde Kert came in, pretty much all of the musicians that I named, they all studied under Clyde Kert. Marlon Jordan, Nicholas Payton, Mark Bro, myself, Jason Marsalis, Trombone Shorty, Jonathan Baptiste, Sullivan Fortner, Big Sam, Andrew Bayham, Leon Brown. I mean, with Steve Walker, we're talking about 30 years of musicians, the last 30 years, up until he retired from Nokia. We're pretty much looking at his work from the time that he was there, with all of the musicians that are having success now and influencing our music and culture in the city. So Clyde, not only was he a catalyst back then, we can see the proof of his work by the musicians that are out here working and doing things. And actually, with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, when it was first formed and we first started doing concerts, Clyde Kert actually conducted the band. So he had a relationship with the orchestra in the very beginning. He was the conductor. But Clyde Kert, his family grew up right around the corner from my family, my dad's family. They're from the Tremay area, and they live right down the street. Clyde's father was also a trumpet player, and he wrote arrangements And we played those arrangements for years with the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra. I still pull those tunes out sometimes and play it. His dad was a beautiful orchestrator and arranger for jazz big band. But Clyde was pretty much a part of the family because he knew my entire family. He knew my grandfather. He knew my grandmother, all of my aunts, uncles, and then it got down to me.
Yeah.
So he was always in some way, I was always 1 or 2 degrees of separation from him, even though I didn't know it, just coming up just throughout my life. But no, Clyde was amazing. Yeah. And he was a huge part of my development.
Yes, he was. I remember him very well with my father and just being on the scene, very nurturing.
Yeah.
What's beautiful about this, Adonis, is that as you mentioned Clyde Kert's name and other musicians who played a role in your growth and development, they have also been there for other musicians like Nick Payton, like Herlin Riley, and so many others. And that's to me, I just think that's the fact that us both being from New Orleans and having that as a part of our fabric. A lot of people can't really say that. Um,
Yeah.
let's go back to the drums, okay? To the drums. I asked Herlin Riley this question. I'd like to ask you this question as well. How significant are the drums to the history of New Orleans musicians, or just in the history of music itself?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think it's pretty much a fact in American music that the drum set was the only instrument that was created in the form of a drum set. It was innovated and created in the United States of America. That one instrument is the only instrument that we can really take credit for, at least back then. People were playing guitars and basses and trumpets and saxophones in European music forever. So the drum set is really the American contribution to jazz instrumentation or any kind of musical instrumentation. So that's the one thing that makes the drum set significant in the music and what we do. But back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and during those eras, there were a lot of drummers who were leaders back then. Art Blakey had bands, and Max Roach had his famous quintet with Clifford Brown, and Buddy Rich had led bands, and Louis Bellson, and you just had a host of drummers, and those were actually the bands that everybody wanted to play in, the bands that the great drummers were playing in, that they led. And just over the years, I don't want to get too far away from the question, but over the years, I really feel that there's been this prejudice, this kind of subconsciously, people have prejudice against drummers being band leaders. And that is something that inspires me to be great. Yes. And to be better than everyone else, and to be good at what I do. Because even since I've taken over this position with the orchestra, I've had a lot of people who wanted to replace me and take my place. And I think part of it is simply because not the musicians who really know me and know that I understand harmony, I write music, I play the piano, and I know all of these things. But just from the outside, I think people kind of expect it to be a trumpet player, or they expect it to be a singer. And vocalists, they've had to deal with this over the years too. But just for me personally, I have a lot of boundaries, not boundaries, but walls to break down. I have walls to break down when it comes to being a drummer and being a good leader, and breaking through the stereotypes that drummers can't lead organizations.
I appreciate that.
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that's just, it came.
No, you did, and you shifted the paradigm, and I think that's important because, actually you're right. That happened. That has been the case. That has been the stereotypical case in so many different instances, where most folks would never think that the drummer would be the band leader, but you beg to differ, and you have, and so your path has truly shown that. So no, you've answered the question. You talked a lot about your father, your uncle. What were some other musical influencers in your life, whether it was in New Orleans or other places? Who are some of those influencers?
Well, I have a lot of them. Obviously my family. James Black was really good. For him and my dad were best friends up until the time that he died. So James Black would be at my house every day. He would come in, tap on the drum set, play a little bit. He was giving my dad drum lessons. So I was getting everything from James Black too. My dad get a lesson, I would get a lesson. I learned everything James Black played. And my brother, who also was playing trumpet at the time, was getting lessons from James Black on a trumpet.
Wow.
So James Black was a huge influence for me outside of my family. And then the Marcelluses, without question, they were in a forefront of New Orleans music on the national and international scene. So all of the records, bands that they had, I mean, we were all over that as New Orleans musicians. The Jordan family, the Baptiste family, Alvin Baptiste, Harold Baptiste, and then our usual suspects, the Miles Davises and the Clifford Browns and Louis Armstrong, without a doubt. So we can just go on and on and on. There's not a person who has been influential in our music that hasn't had some type of effect on me and my music and what I do.
Hey man, I mean, like once again, I mentioned earlier that we were blessed to be in New Orleans. I mean, I'm not a musician; I come from a family of musicians, but that was a blessing to have that foundation. You mentioned Nick Payton. I know you all you have a very close relationship with Nicholas Payton, but more so, I'm interested in the significance of the that Nicholas 90 quint. I think it was a 90 quintet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's I think 1994 was the year that he put the band together.
Well, so talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, first of all, just Nicholas as an individual and musician, he's a very smart guy. That's one. He's a very smart guy, very talented. And for me, when I met him at Nokia, I mean, he was light years ahead of us musically. I mean, he knew so much more music than we did. I mean, he would teach me things on the drums. He would go around the class and just teach everybody. He plays 10 instruments and he plays them all well, but he just hears music and understands it in a way that I've not seen from many musicians. It really didn't matter who they were. But to be able to work with someone who is my peer, but so much far advanced than I was musically, was something that was different. But the good thing about it was everybody went to Nick and asked him questions. So it wasn't like I was by myself.
Yeah.
So we're, we're 15, 16. And, when I ended up playing in his band, that was my best musical experience, up to that point, because we were growing together on the bandstand. Musically, we grew together. We experienced the world together, and, we partied and had drinks and had band fights and arguments, and it was just great. It was great. It was great because we just grew up together, became men together. Musically, we grew up together, and you could hear that progression when you listen to our music. If you listen to the first record we did, Gumbo Nouveau, as a band, that's his second record with Verve, but it was our first as a band. And you listen to that up until Sonic Trance, which was the last record that we did together. You can hear how we grew as musicians, and how he grew as a band leader and composer. So that was the greatest musical experience for me. I was a young man at the time. I think I was 20 years old when I did Gumbo Nouveau.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, he was a huge influence, still is a huge influence. I keep up with what he's doing. Actually, I just texted him today about trying to get together tomorrow. But it's very unusual because a lot of times when you get into band situations, especially in jazz, you're working underneath someone who's a lot older than you, or who's at least a generation ahead of you. In our case, we were the same age, learning music together, but I learned a lot from him as a band leader.
Now, see, I like to hear that. I like to hear that. I love to hear it because, you were peers. Not to say that's, well, yeah, to some degree it is unheard of, but for the most part, you both from New Orleans. You both have that history. You both have some of the same influencers and are been around some of the same people. But to be able to learn from each other, your brother,
Hmm.
your brother.
Oh yeah.
So I want to go back to the bio as you were going deeper and deeper, and I want to go back to the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra.
Hmm.
Take me through that experience, being the artistic director of the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra.
Hmm. Yeah, well, being an administrator and a musician is a very challenging, it's something that's very challenging to do. And I think a lot of people don't really understand the amount of responsibility that comes with taking on a position like this. Um, I was comfortable just being a musician and getting an itinerary in the mail, and just going out and not having a whole lot of responsibility. But taking on this position full time, uh, it has taught me a whole lot. I've always, uh, you know, um, been humble and been a person that really respected the music and put the music first. But taking on this position has taught me how to put your community and people first,
Yeah.
because ultimately what your responsibility is when you become an administrator of a cultural institution, nonprofit institution, you become a servant to the community that you serve. So that's the biggest part, uh, the most important part of the job for me. Now, all of the other things, the technical things, would be how I have to navigate the space to be able to be successful. So not only do I have to be a musician, I have to work with a board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
I have to, you know, uh, take my ideas and run those ideas through an artistic development committee. So I curate concerts. Uh, every song that we perform for every concert, I choose the songs, I choose the concepts, what the arrangements are going to sound like. I choose the arrangers, I choose the special guests, I choose the dates. And then we have a process for concerts that I have to work with a staff. So we have a staff that I have to work with, and we have to manage to be able to make those concerts successful. Uh, we have education programs. I have to develop those programs and help execute those programs. Um, Again, I have to work with a board of directors. I have to work with a committee. I have to work with our manager, our booking agent. I come up with all of the ideas uh, for our recordings,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a lot of work. I write proposals. I am constantly on meeting. I have meetings almost every day. When we were open, I would have 3 and 4 meetings a day. I still have to be a musician. I still have to practice. There's a lot of responsibility there. I have to meet with funders.
Yeah.
I met with the Ford Foundation 2 weeks ago. I've met with Mellon. I meet with Doris Duke this week. So you have to meet with funders. You have to work with grant writers for concepts to make things fundable for your organization. Um, there's a lot that comes with it. I have to meet with private donors and people who are advocates of the organization, who want to help us. So I have to sit in personal meetings. I join boards, even though I don't really like to be on a lot of boards. I get on boards to be able to network and to meet with people. So it's a huge responsibility, and not only do you have to do all of that, you have to deliver.
Yeah.
So for me to sit down with foundations, over 3 years, 3.5 years, and not get any funding wouldn't look good, on me as an artistic director running an organization. To put on a concert, in a venue that could, host 500 seats at capacity, and nobody comes through the doors. We got a 500 seater, and only 50 people come to every show. That's not a good reflection on me as an artistic director
Exactly.
or on my organization. To have the band come out and not be well rehearsed and the music sounds like crap, that's a reflection on me. For the musicians not to be happy, I have to rehearse the band. I have to deal with the musicians because a lot of them I know personally. So if anything is going wrong, if their money is not on time when they're waiting on it, if we're on tour and something goes wrong, I mean, I have to manage a lot. but it all comes, it's pressure to deliver. So it's not an easy job. You know, some people will look at it and be like, man, I can do that job. You probably can't do this job. It has taken me 3.5 years to be able to wake up and be comfortable. I mean, at first it was very stressful because I had a lot of things coming from a lot of directions,
Right.
while trying to patch up holes in a sinking ship.
Yes, exactly.
So I just didn't come onto an organization that had everything in place when I came on, and I was able to just kind of ride the wave to be successful. No, I had to build everything back up from the ground. We had no management, no booking agents. We weren't doing any concerts. The band hadn't performed in a year. I was new coming into a board of directors that were there from the previous leadership. So that was very challenging to be able to work with those people and try to change their mindset in the way that they did business. So it's very difficult. It is not easy to be the artistic director of a jazz organization. Wynton Marsalis, that guy is amazing.
Yeah, he
to
is.
have been in that position. And I talk to him all the time and get advice from him. Since I got this position, I contact him as much as possible. I get his advice, and he's helped me a lot along the way. Not only do we have to run an organization, we have a facility that we have to run. That's very expensive to keep the doors open for, to be able to keep the lights on. You know, there's a lot that comes with that. People do not understand the responsibility that comes with it. When I took this job, I put my reputation on the line. I had a successful career. I didn't have to do this to be a successful musician.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to do it because, one, I didn't want to see the organization fail, and I did it because of my commitment to the musicians that have been playing in the orchestra for over a decade. So I put my career on the line to make this organization successful. If any part of it would have failed over the past 3.5 years since I've been here, it would have been a reflection on me in some kind of way.
Exactly.
I can't even remember what the question was. I don't even know if I answered the question for you.
You did. Hilarious. Man, once again, I appreciate you going deeper, and I understand. I truly understand when it comes to running an organization. I mean, I run a business, and that's not easy. But you pretty much had to. It's like you had a startup company. You literally had to start from scratch. Okay. And
well, not necessarily. You know, the challenge for this one is it wasn't a startup company. You know, so I have a board full of presidents and CEOs, people that run the Audubon Institute. You know, Jeff Goldring. You know, I had multi-millionaires, people who run businesses all the time. And, you know, the orchestra's budget is over $1 million, easy, 1.3, $1.4 million budget that we have to be able to get every year just to operate. So I wasn't walking into a startup. The organization had been there for 15 years before I got there, and they had a lot of success before I got there. But because of the challenges, it was a very difficult time for the organization. You know, it's like you're trying to come and clean up after a bad president gets out of office. You know, it's just going to take some time, and you're going to need a whole lot of help from a whole lot of people. If it was a startup, it would have been different, because then I could have made a lot of decisions, you know, that would have, you know, supported my mission and my vision for the organization. I walked into somebody else's, and then I had to slowly bring my vision into it, and then work hard to, one, get people to believe in a philosophy of what it is that I see for the organization, and then work towards that philosophy. So it's a little bit different than the startup, because I walked into having to raise a whole bunch of money, keep a building open, but like all of these things. I didn't have the opportunity to start it from the ground up to see where it could go.
I understand, and you know, and pardon me for saying that way. You know, a lot of times we say these things when a lot of times we always use startups as an example. But you had everything you wanted, but it's almost like, okay, it's like a rebrand, a restart to something. And that's interesting because you had to be a musician, you had other things going on, you know, and you know, trying to make sure the ship is running properly and smoothly and effectively, and you're raising the money. So that's a lot of work and a lot of headaches, but at the same time, it's also a lot of joy, I'm sure, you know.
It is a lot of joy, but you know, it requires a lot of patience
Yes.
and a lot of confidence, because I mean, and this is just the way business operates. You're going to have people that are always going to challenge you,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be prepared. As long as you're prepared, you're fine, but you have to be willing to accept the challenges with an open mind and not really be angry or upset or develop a bad relationship with people because they don't agree with your vision or the way you operate an organization. So, I've learned a lot just about that, how to manage the people who do support my vision for the organization and the people who don't,
Mm-hmm.
but they all are important and they all play a big part and support the organization and keep us alive. So those are the things I think I've gotten a whole lot better at over the time that I've been since I've been a part of the organization. Just being able to hear everybody's side, respect their side, and then find out a way that I can bring everybody together so that we could be successful.
Amen. Amen. Well, speaking of adding more to your plate, congratulations on
Mhm.
being the director
Oh,
of the Swiss Music Festival.
yeah.
And I'm telling you, once again, I said you started off, you had a lot of stuff going on. Talk to me about the Swiss Music Festival, being the director of that organization.
Well, that festival is an amazing festival. It's been around 40 years, but 35 years in Ascona, Switzerland, where it is now.
Yes.
That festival is a New Orleans themed festival, a bass festival, where the founder of the festival loved New Orleans musicians, and he just wanted to have New Orleans in Switzerland every year. So he started a festival. So over the years, they brought hundreds or maybe even thousands of musicians to perform at this festival, uh, in which I had the opportunity to perform at maybe 3 or 4 times before I took this position. So in 2019, I had the opportunity to bring the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra to the festival as a leader.
Mhm.
And we went over and we did some special things where I was able to feature members of the orchestra as leaders during the 10-day tenure of the festival. So it was really interesting. I was kind of producing parts of the festival indirectly just because I had to bring the band up, manage them, put them in different configurations and try to figure out how to schedule everything. So it was really interesting. And then, last year the pandemic came, and the festival was they couldn't bring any New Orleans musicians to the festival because of the pandemic, but they still held a local version of the festival. And ended up coming in contact and just sending the president of the festival an email just to see where they were and how they were doing, because I know how difficult it is. They parted ways with their artistic director, so they didn't really have a contact to New Orleans. So I started to receive calls and text messages from musicians who love the festival and love to go and perform over there about contacting the festival to see if they needed some help. So I sent an email to the president. He sent something back. We had a few conversations, and things just organically kind of worked because I was in a process. I had actually started my booking agency. So it just was a perfect fit. I had my booking agency that I had been working on for a year. They needed some help. They needed somebody from New Orleans to come in and help them with the vision for the festival. So then we just decided to work together and have a partnership. So now the festival is being planned to happen this June over in Ascona.
Okay.
And generally, annually, the festival brings about 50 New Orleans musicians over every year. What I would like to do is to be able to add to that experience and offer other things culturally from the city of New Orleans. We have so many things that are great about New Orleans that we could add to the festival that aren't currently happening. So that's good because the guy who was there before, he did a great job of really solidifying the brand all over Europe, and staying true to New Orleans music and tradition. So now I can come and help build on what they had in place for the last 35 years. So I want to be able to get the Mardi Gras Indians to come over. I want to be able to have build their culinary programming with the festival and bring some chefs over. I also want to bring some dancers over to start teaching people how to do the New Orleans second line, which is one thing I really would like to add to our shows when we're traveling. You know, a lot of countries and places that are rich in the music, they usually have a dance component to it. You know, if you go and see an Afro-Cuban band from Cuba, you're going to be doing a salsa. Or you can go early before the show and take a salsa class. You know, if you're playing a Brazilian band, if you're in a samba band, you can actually do the same thing and learn how to samba before the band plays. I want to bring that experience to the New Orleans experience, where we can go out with a band, whether it's a brass band or a small group band, and we're playing New Orleans music. We can teach people how to do the New Orleans second line. So I have a great plan for that, and a great instructor who put together a program to be able to help people to learn how to do it with a brass band. So that's going to be great. I don't want to give up too much information about that until I announce it, but I want to add that experience to the music. So all of those things, those are my ideas and ways to help the festival grow over the next 5 to 10 years.
Man, that's awesome. And it's in June, right?
It's in June every year. It's the last week in June. This year, June 24th through July 3rd. It's 10 days. It's in the mountains, the lower parts of the Alps, and it borders Italy. So it's about a 90-minute drive from Milan. And it's on a beautiful lake with a piazza surrounding the lake with a lot of restaurants and bars and things like that. So it's an amazing experience. I mean, once you go to the festival once, you'll go back every year.
I'm sure.
So because of that, one of the ideas I had for the festival is to do an exchange. You know, the New Orleans musicians have been going over there for decades, but none of the Swiss musicians have had an opportunity to come to New Orleans and see what New Orleans is like. So I want to be able to bring some Swiss bands over to New Orleans where they can do performances, and also bring the administrative staff from the festival to come to New Orleans and see what it's like over here. So keeping in mind that I wanted to do an exchange, that'll open up doors for a lot. So I said all that to say with the exchange is that I'm thinking about putting together something to where I could have groups travel over to the festival every year. They can come and travel with me and see the festival every year. So I may start out with a small group of maybe 30 people and bring 30 people from New Orleans over to the festival and do a cultural tour the entire time that they're there. So there's a lot. I can talk about that for a long time, but that's the idea. That's the idea.
Well, you pretty much answered my question on what's on the horizon, because you have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of good stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing how everything unfolds, and which I know is going to be awesome. What advice would you give young people today?
There's so much advice that I could give them. I mean, I have kids. I have a 25-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old. When it comes to the music, or just generally speaking?
You know what, general, because I don't want to just leave it to musicians, but just in general to our young folks today.
Mm-hmm. Just listen more than you speak. You know, just listen more. You know, if you listen more, that opens up doors to a lot of opportunities for you if you're a good listener. You know, a lot of times I was like this when I was young. People just like to hear themselves talk and they think they know everything. Well, experience will teach you better.
Yes.
But until that time, you can help. You can avoid a lot of hardships and problems by listening. You know, I try to listen to my elders as much as possible when I'm on a bandstand. I think the thing that makes me a good drummer is that I listen. I listen to everybody and everything, and you know, I'm a supportive drummer. You know, some drummers just want to show how much they can play. I can play a lot, but when I was younger, I had the opportunity to do that. Now I want to help embellish other musicians' ideas and develop something creative and special on a bandstand. But I can't do that if I'm not a good listener. Exactly. You know, so yeah, just listen more than you speak, and be inspired by things around you, and be confident that if there's anything that you want to do that's positive, that you can do it.
Man, some wisdom. That's nothing but wisdom. Listen, man, I wanna thank you for your
Thank you. Thank you.
man, for your wisdom, for your contributions to New Orleans, your hard work, your creative spirit, um, just everything, to the community. I appreciate you so much and all that you bring to the table, and thank you for that advice. So, hopefully I look forward to having you again in the future. I'll be following you, not just on social media, but I'll ping you now and then to see how things are going on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm here. Thanks again for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about what I do and what we do as a community to educate and preserve and advance New Orleans music and culture.
Hey, you just said it, educate and preserve, and that's exactly why I'm doing this. Everyone, this has been Anything and Everything New Orleans Music Legends series. We've had the wonderful Adonis Rose. Stick around for our musical treat.
Y'all like that one? Y'all like that one? All right. So our last record is entitled Songs, a tribute to Alan Toussaint. Any Alan Toussaint fans out there? He was amazing. So we're going to do some music from that recording, and we have some special guests here with us. We have the fabulous Mr. John Butte, who we're going to bring up a little later, and we have the amazing Miss Renee Marie. She's going to be singing with us also. Let's give it up for Renee. But right now we're going to dig into the Alan Toussaint book, and we're going to do a tune entitled Working in a Coal Mine, which I'm sure you guys should be familiar with that one, right?